Hi, thank you for joining me today. And just starting off, I was thinking about Jesus's metaphor of use of yeast and or leaven, depending on what version you read, and how it took a whole different meaning for me after reading today's chapters. And I try to put it into everyday life and put it into context. So just a tiny bit of yeast can impact the whole loaf. And it made me think about how sometimes seemingly small compromises can actually have far-reaching consequences in our lives and on the things that we do. It's kind of like it reminded me of the one drop rule. I don't know if you've ever heard, but it was a way of explaining the segregation for back then in the US, that if some people who appeared to be white, but if they had one drop of black blood, then they were quote unquote contaminated. Obviously that wasn't a good thing, but it just made me think about just one small. So how it was demonstrated, just to put it in context, was they'll have like a maybe bowl or a glass of water, and you put one drop of black ink. If you put one drop of black ink and mix it, the water becomes dark. So just that one drop. So it made me think about that and put that in context, and I just put that at the back of my mind about how powerful seemingly yeast or leaven really is. The Pharisees and Sadducees were focused on morality, and their teachings centered really around that. And their goal was ticking, more or less ticking morality boxes, right? And their focus was on being good and trying to keep up with the things that they had, the standards that they had put up, with regards to morality. And the danger of this is that the goal then becomes that instead of doing God's work. And instead of, or even before doing God's work, instead of the saving work on the cross of Calvary, because focusing on morality the way they did was as if they could, whatever they could do could save them. But we all know that the only thing that could save us is Jesus. We know, well, they didn't know at the time, right? But if we strive towards being good people, right, it would eventually have a negative effect on us. Because when we start to think of, and this is what I think was the problem with the Sadducees and Pharisees, because they had put themselves on this moral pedestal, because they seem to have achieved the man-made laws that they had put up, it makes you start to look down on other people. It makes you feel as if, anybody that doesn't live up to those standards are sinners and are not worthy. And that's what happened here. Jesus warned the disciples to watch out for their teaching, because it would leaven the whole loaf of their faith. His reference to the leftovers after feeding the multitude was to remind them that all sufficiency was in him. He had everything they needed as individuals and as a collective. Now, there was a symbolism in Jesus using his spit to heal that blind man. We'd seen him heal lots of people before, and he didn't have to use spit. He didn't have to do anything, he would touch their eyes or whatever. But then, for me, I believe the symbolism here was to say how he could take something that seemed like trash or contaminating or even disgusting to some and make something beautiful out of it, right? And he used it as a means of blessing. There was also the recorded healing. This was also the only recorded healing that had a two-step process, right? And this, for some Bible scholars, they believe that this was because Jesus was trying to reference, make a point to his disciples. Remember that before now, they couldn't heal the demoniac, and they were wondering why. So it was, some scholars believe that he was showing his commitment to the disciples, right? Because they weren't properly seeing him well and the work that he was doing, but that he wanted to show how, he could perfect their faith patiently. This might not make sense, perhaps maybe the way I've explained it, but yeah, it kind of made sense when I wrote it down. Well, moving on. Peter's declaration about Jesus was spirit-inspired. And for the first time, I thought very deeply about Jesus' response in verse 11. when he says, you are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church. And I thought about it. Did Jesus mean that he was making Peter the foundation of the church? Of course not. And I guess, I don't know if you are like me, but we're actually in danger of thinking that that's what it was, because for the longest time, every time I heard that statement, I felt like, oh yes, he says he'll build his church on Peter. But no, we know from the Bible that Jesus is the chief cornerstone. He's the cornerstone. He's the foundation of the church. So he didn't mean that he was building the church on Peter, but he was saying that he was giving him authority for the church, not that he was building the church on him. Point to note, very powerful. It stuck out to me. I hope it did to you too. Now let me tell you what I learned about God from these verses. Nothing can stop God's kingdom. It will outlast everything. Jesus knew that he would go to the cross to die. It was the plan all along. And he was preparing his disciples for this, but also for his resurrection, so that they'll be equipped for the work that he'll send them out to do and be strengthened for it. This is why in Matthew 16:24-28, he instructed them to carry their crosses. Anyone who wanted to follow him had to carry their cross and have an eternity focus in life. And I guess at the end of the day, what struck out for me personally from this was, not to hide my faith. Jesus said it, anyone who will be ashamed of me, I'll be ashamed of the person. So carrying your cross, for me, it doesn't mean just, your burdens, like I used to think about when I was a kid. It also meant like carrying your faith, like let your faith be evident, let it show, let your light shine before all men. Let people not guess or not know who you are. Show your Christianity, basically, and don't be ashamed of Christ. Thank you for joining me today. Looking forward to tomorrow, where God willing, I'll be sharing more lessons with you. Have a wonderful day. Goodbye. God bless you.